In this demonstration, we're now going to shift our attention to subscription policies, which is a mechanism to control what people can do inside of your subscription. So to begin, we're going to head over to the Azure portal. Okay, and here I'm in the Azure portal, and one of the things to note, first of all, in the previous demonstrations, I was using a trial account to kind of show you everything. At this point, I have shifted over to one of my other accounts, so don't worry, everything will still proceed as normal, but you will see from time to time that I'm in different Azure accounts as I'm trying to demo things, but nothing to be alarmed at. You should be able to do everything you want to do in your current account. To begin, though, I'm going to go over to subscriptions, just like you saw when you created your trial account. But in my case right now, I've got Visual Studio Enterprise, and in some other demos, you'll see I have other subscriptions as well. But for right now, I'm going to use my Visual Studio Enterprise account. And I'm going to go in here, and if we scroll down on the left-hand side, you'll see a section called Policies. And this is where we want to focus this demonstration on. If we click Policies, on the right-hand side, you'll see that currently everything is 100% in compliance, and that's ultimately because I don't have a lot of policies and a lot of resources right now in this subscription. But the key thing at the top here is you can see that I can assign policies. So if I click this box, Assign Policy, it will prompt me in the next screen to choose my scope. So this is where do I want to assign the policy. In my case, I just want to choose the subscription. I don't need to exclude any specific resources from this assignment. So I'm saying everything in this subscription called Visual Studio Enterprise I want to apply policy to. Well, again, what is our policy? And this is where you create a definition for your policy, or you use one that's already built in. So you can click the little box to the right, and this will open up all the different policy definitions. In fact, there's 144 right now available to you. You can create these as JSON templates and put them in here as well. This is where Microsoft has massively expanded policies because they've taken all the best practices from lots of enterprises out there. But in your case, let's look at a few of these real quickly. Well, what if I wanted to set a policy on deploy log analytics agent for Linux VMs, making sure that, it's a... Well, let's look at a few of these very quickly. If we scroll down, you'll see things like audit VMs that do not use managed disks, something you'll find out about in the virtual machines section, making sure you have log analytics agents for your Windows and Linux VMs, and so on and so on. Things like disk encryption are in here as well for storage accounts, and audit transparent data encryption status for PaaS services like SQL databases. These are all good examples. But if I go back to the top of this and search, if I filter with built-in and then choose allowed, you can see here a number of policy definitions that are actually quite common. Things like not allowed resource types, allowed storage account SKUs, allowed resource types, and these two are really popular: allowed virtual machine SKUs and allowed locations. So I can say, for example, I only want to allow specific virtual machine SKUs. I don't want to perhaps allow very, very large virtual machines because they could be very costly. So I can choose here allowed virtual machine SKUs and click select. The policy definition is filled in. You can see the assignment name, allowed virtual machine SKUs. You can change that if you want to. And if I scroll further down, I can see the description, assigned by, and here is where I put in the parameters for that policy template. So right now, 0 selected. If I click the drop down, I can now choose the virtual machine SKUs that I want to allow in the subscription. So I could choose, just the basic A0, A1, whatever I want. Maybe I want to choose all the D series. Again, you'll learn more about these in virtual machine section if you haven't already jumped ahead and covered that. But I could choose, D series, which are common, A series, etc. So just go ahead and select the ones that you would want to allow. I can choose also to use a managed identity, which you'll learn more about in the identity section later on as well. But with that, if I'm happy with everything there, I can go ahead and click assign. And now that creates that policy. And now it will only allow me to deploy machines in the subscription that match that specific SKU type. And you'll see later on when you build virtual machines, if I tried to then go and build a virtual machine that was perhaps, an F series or G series, it would simply error out during the build process. And if I wanted to fix it, I would need to go back in here to this allowed virtual machines policy and basically delete that assignment if I wanted to get rid of it, or edit it if I want to just add additional SKU types. Now this is very important because in the enterprise, you probably want to start off with a certain amount of SKUs that you allow, particularly if you're early on in your Azure journey. Again, maybe the A series, D series, etc. And then as needed, you might allow certain teams access to those very, very large, perhaps the M series giant memory virtual machines. You could then allow them access to them by assigning a policy that allowed them access to that. And perhaps you assign that policy to a specific resource group. Perhaps you don't assign it to a whole subscription. So you get kind of creative as you work through these. The last thing to mention, which isn't strictly covered on the exam scope yet, is the concept of management groups. And all that means is you can take policies that you've assigned to different subscriptions, and instead of going to every single subscription and creating the policy and assigning it, you can essentially assign it to a management group that contains multiple subscriptions. So if you said, okay, I've got 100 subscriptions across my enterprise and I want the same policy applied, I would then go ahead and use a management group for that and assign the policy that way. So that's future discussion, but just something you need to be aware of as well. And with that, this concludes this demonstration. I highly encourage you to go in here and play with these and then try to provision things against the rules that you have. But just make sure if you don't need that permanently, go ahead and delete that assignment. Otherwise, you'll run into various problems later on.